which is USAID, funding financially the networks around judges, around the legal system, around the governance structure of every country on planet Earth.
As civil unrest grows worse and more people ask questions, USAID is back in the spotlight yet again, with even more troubling stories of financial misuse. This time, the claims come from Mike Benz, a former U.S. government official who worked with the State Department.
Well, they've been managing the American world empire. The State Department really is at the top of the pyramid of power in the U.S. government. Secret political warfare on the low. And the problem is the American people are not going to like this.
Through his live talks with big names like Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, Mike Benz reveals even more hidden scandals and long-forgotten cases of financial abuse. What more did he reveal on live television? And what was Elon's sudden reaction to what he said? Join us as we break down the details exposed and much more.
But what is the blob authorized to do? What is USAID authorized to do under statute? Well, something they call judicial reform.
This USAID thing, he explained it the last time he was here, and I don't think I really grasped it.
The Internews scandal. Mike Benz is a former federal official who worked with the U.S. Department of State, and through his live discussions with Tucker Carlson and extended podcast episode with Joe Rogan, the former official spoke about a lot of issues he had with USAID. One major event he pointed back to was what happened during the global disease outbreak of 2020. During this time, USAID gave a lot of money to Internews, a nonprofit journalist group, to start a new project called Rooted in Trust. The idea behind this was to use this group as an agency to stop the spread of false information about the ongoing outbreak. They worked by collecting rumors from different countries they believed were dangerous and shedding light on them with real scientific data from experienced professionals about the true nature of the disease. That so far is the official story, but Mike Benz had a lot more to say about what truly happened, and his claims were remarkable. According to him, Internews and USAID took things a step further by signing private deals with local news companies. They also partnered with various radio stations and websites to promote more content aimed at stopping people from believing false rumors and fake medical advice about the disease. This turned out to be a huge blunder, as later on, according to Mike Benz, many of the things they called out as fake were true. How so, you may ask? Let's explore the whole story. Going back to early 2020, the world was in chaos and confusion over the disease outbreak. Misinformation was spreading everywhere, and it got so bad that telling people the simplest things to do on the most basic things like personal hygiene and staying away from infected areas quickly became an industry on its own. People were willing to pay lots of money to hear just about anything they could do to prevent getting infected as long as it sounded like a cool thing to do, and you won't believe some of the things they promoted. Fake medical advice like regularly drinking bleach, consuming dangerous amounts of salt water, and overdosing on hydroxychloroquine quickly became popular on various platforms. Even the government was getting directly involved in trying to control what people thought about the disease, because wrong information about how the infection works would only lead to more cases. Now, this is where USAID came in. The foreign agency in charge of offering help at a time like this gave almost $500 million to Internews, a nonprofit group that was built to promote journalism. With this huge sum of cash, they were expected to start an agency that would stop the spread of fake news. With almost $500 million in their hands, Internews picked out some countries to work with. These were various countries in Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and Latin America. It was in these places that Internews believed the most dangerous rumors had become popular. In a matter of weeks, they collected almost 20,000 articles and online episodes from hundreds of media outlets with bad advice on how to avoid the disease. After that, they sponsored some news outlets they trusted to promote their reports about these rumors. They even got a few government officials involved as well to make sure the leaders weren't part of those contributing to the problem. These reports told people which ideas were true or not, and how to react the next time they came across bad medical advice about the disease. Internews was able to reach its goal, and at first it seemed like its Rooted in Trust program was doing a lot of good. Social media platforms were now taking action against medically dangerous ideas and called out various outlets that were still publishing news that went beyond the reports given by trusted officials through the program. News stations used the scientific reports Internews and USAID provided as a metric to decide what to talk about and what to ignore. Thanks to the government officials that got involved with Internews, The leaders of these nations passed laws to punish those who spread ideas that were pointed out by experts as wrong. However, they got so strict in some places that many writers and reporters lost their jobs for saying things that later turned out to be true. Among these ideas were the rumors that the disease came from a hidden laboratory within the Eastern Republic of China, and in response, the Rooted in Trust program fought very hard against it. They called it a false theory and reportedly went as far as getting government officials to strike down anyone who disagreed with them. But you won't believe what happened next, as all it took was a few months for trusted Western news outlets to say the same thing without receiving the same treatment. It got even more embarrassing when the US president began to call the global outbreak China's disease, and worse yet, he kept doing it as a habit from that moment on.
For all of the people from our country, but as you know, China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now.
Sadly, it didn't stop there, as the same issue came up a few weeks later with vaccines. In these countries where Internews agents and USAID officials fought the hardest against the spread of fake news, some people warned that vaccines weren't a sure bet against getting the disease. These persons argued that basic hygiene and quarantine worked better than relying on vaccines to stay safe. They even tried to prove that vaccines that were made in such a hurry might have too many side effects. In response, USAID officials and Internews agents within these countries labeled these claims as dangerous. They insisted everyone should get vaccinated and not trust anyone who tells them otherwise. But yet again, they were proven wrong later by trusted health professionals who said that the vaccines did not stop infection entirely with a lot of people. Worse yet, they also confirmed that most of the side effects were real. According to Mike Benz, this didn't stop USAID officials in these countries from doubling down on their efforts with Internews to quiet those they didn't agree with. They allegedly stepped beyond their boundaries by not just telling people what wasn't true, but also trying to control who was allowed to talk about health issues related to the disease. Internews trained the journalists within the outlets they sponsored with USAID's money to only spread allegedly safe information. They did this even though trusted health officials from the West said otherwise, and with the immense wealth provided by USAID, Internews warned the media companies under their control not to allow certain discussions that went against the original reports they were given. Mike Benz affirmed that USAID officials working with Internews even worked with social media platforms to limit what people could see in their news feeds. At this point, many within the media industry began to question what the project was about. Was it about stopping lies or controlling free speech? Many argued that it was not normal for one group to decide what was right or wrong as far as journalism was concerned. They also wondered why USAID had a part to play in this, especially considering how their role is supposed to be about helping people during times of crisis and disaster. Over $500 million was spent in taking this off the ground. Yet all the while, these countries they were supposed to help were struggling to provide proper health care for those who got infected. The situation got to the point where even journalists sponsored by Internews couldn't take it anymore. Some of them revealed that they were under pressure to tell others only what the program told them to, even if it involved trusted information given from reliable sources and authorities within the medical field. The agencies were afraid of losing money or getting flagged as a wrong source of information if they even questioned what USAID and Internews told them to write. Whistleblowers said it was more about controlling public opinion than stopping fake news. Now this is where it gets interesting. Instead of making a public statement to clear all misconceptions and make up for past mistakes, neither USAID nor Internews spoke out about the issue. According to Mike Benz, the program ended quietly as both agencies pushed everything under the rug. In the coming years, they tried to act like the project never even existed. And in the end, all it did was show how bad things got when one group decided what the truth was about a global issue, and USAID was behind it all. The Vietnam controversy. To explain the next big scandal during his long conversation with Joe Rogan, Mike Benz turned the clock back to one of the most notable periods in the history of Southeast Asia, the Vietnam War. This was a conflict that started because of a long-winded fight over control of the region. Not too long after the country won independence from France after the famous Battle of Dien Bien Phu, Vietnam was split into two regions that were led by two types of rulers. The northern region was ruled by communists, while the southern region was backed by the United States. The rising tension between both sides led to a full-scale war that lasted until the North defeated the South and reunited the country in 1975.
By March 1975, 2 years and 2 months after the signing of the Paris Peace Agreement, the South Vietnamese army was in full retreat, before a superior communist force.
According to Mike Benz, part of what caused the war to happen was the increased influence of USAID in the southern region. Their mission was to help the region rebuild while supporting those in need of food and medical supplies during the peak of the war. Mike Benz stated that this was what they were doing as far as official news sources were concerned, but behind the scenes, something sinister was going on. USAID had allegedly gone beyond its boundaries by getting involved in the trade of illegal substances. Through the 60s and 70s in this region, there were three major sources of illegal substances. Vietnam was one of them, with the others being Laos and Cambodia. For many farmers, growing illegal substances in these places was a profitable business, and they grew them as valuable crops. The situation was so bad in these places that selling these substances made more money for most farmers than food. This was how the southern region's economy thrived, and how the young men coped during such difficult times. Most of these young men formed a majority of the groups that were willing to fight against North Vietnam and its allies. How were these men going to thrive during times like this? By doing their trade with the financial support given to them through the American Foreign Aid Agency in charge of the region. And that was none other than USAID. Because of this, the agency that was supposed to provide the resources they needed to thrive during the warring period only ended up helping addicted people smuggle more illegal substances. Mike tried to prove this by pointing at USAID's connections to Air America. He believes this was a secret airline that was run by a private network of spies. It was supposed to be used for transporting supplies and weapons, but some reports claim they were used to move illegal substances as well. Mike says USAID was involved in this as well. After all, they allegedly worked with Air America to deliver food and medical aid to remote villages while also carrying these substances. Local warlords in the places where these things were taken from used Air America to sell them to those in South Vietnam for a much higher price than they would get in America. As a result, they made a lot of money from those fighting a war. USAID allegedly got even more involved by supporting programs that only looked innocent on the surface. One example Mike pointed out was the Crop Substitution Program, an initiative built up to help farmers stop growing illegal substances and start focusing on other profitable business models on the open field. In most cases, the money went to farmers who were willing to take the money, but never wanted to stop what they were doing. Sadly, that wasn't the worst part. Mike argues that some of the money was even used to protect drug smugglers instead of stopping them. According to reports he cited, the agency also worked with the powerful leaders in Laos and South Vietnam who controlled the drug trade and used supplies from America to boost their operations. One example Mike pointed out to Joe Rogan was a man named Vang Pao, a military leader in Laos who was also a Western ally.
Vang Pao's favorite spot is the front line. Some of his American CIA advisors complain that VP, as they call him.
While he was given lots of money and resources by USAID, most of them were channeled to his drug operations, which were uncovered much later. He allegedly did this by putting huge doses of these substances in food supplies that were shipped to American soldiers in various places. This, according to Mike Benz, was what caused the addiction crisis in the US military. The same thing was now happening in South Vietnam because USAID never took the time to make sure the money was used properly. This became a huge problem for American soldiers, and by the early 70s, thousands of American troops in Vietnam were now addicted to illegal substances. Mike believes this was not an accident because the substances they were using were the same ones that usually came from Southeast Asia's drug networks. Most of them were not linked to groups that supported the US government, but by the drug lords sponsored by an unknown source. On top of that, the timing of the finding aligned perfectly with when USAID just happened to become actively involved in Vietnam. This allegedly became more obvious when the war was over, while the Western troops made their way back to the United States. As the soldiers returned home, they did so with a newfound addiction, and the illegal substances quickly became popular in major American cities. Because of this, the illegal networks that grew during the war continued operating with greater success. Mike argued that nobody knew USAID was involved in this until the late 70s when reports started exposing how deep the agency got into the matter. Many journalists and investigators got into the fray, and among them were tested political researchers like Alfred McCoy, Peter Dale Scott, and Gary Webb. But perhaps the most convincing among all of them was Daniel Marvin. He spoke out as a former U.S. Special Forces officer about the covert operations tied to the trade of illegal substances. A lot of his story is written in his book, Expendable Elite, and it sold so many copies that the Special Forces Association openly dismissed a lot of the claims as fiction. Apart from that, some former Air America pilots confessed to transporting illegal substances, and declassified government reports show that U.S. allies in Vietnam were involved in the production. As of then, USAID was secretly intended to be a tool for supporting freedom and democracy, but all it supported was one of the biggest drug trades in human history. Now brace yourself, dear viewer, because we are just getting started. Chaos in the music industry. Throughout the early 2000s, the Cuban Republic was going through many problems that traced back to the fall of the Soviet Union. Without the help of their fallen allies, the country struggled with many issues for decades, ranging from unemployment to a slowly collapsing economy. After a few formal agreements, USAID got to work in helping Cuba get back on their feet. But the path they chose to achieve this was through a thriving underground culture nobody expected them to be a part of, and that was hip-hop. Cuba had a lot of musical talent, especially among young people. So at first it looked like supporting the music scene was a means of bringing in more money to the country. But for many, the plan felt too simplistic and awkward, especially as there seemed to be more pressing issues they should have been focusing on than trying to boost Cuba's entertainment industry. Mike argued that their real plan remained subtle for a long time until 2009, when it became a full-blown initiative aimed at using Cuba's hip-hop scene to inspire young people to speak about the things they hate about their government. The idea was that an expressive form of art like hip-hop would be good enough to boost the morale of young people to want more freedom and democracy. Of course, USAID couldn't do this, so they allegedly hired another agency to do it for them. This agency was called Creative Associates International, and they had one simple job: recruit as many music promoters and influencers who knew how to use the art to enforce change within the culture. These were the people who set the current trends in the entertainment industry with new styles of pop music. The only difference is that now they would be pushing new narratives, not new styles or genres of music. The problem was that most of the new promoters assigned by USAID to work under Creative Associates had their eyes on one client, and that was the popular hip-hop Cuban group called Los Aldeanos. This group was known for calling out the Cuban government in brilliant yet subtle ways, and the promoters wanted them to work under the direct support of USAID's alibi. So they approached one of the group's members, named Aldo Rodriguez. They offered him support for the team's upcoming concerts and music projects. What they didn't tell him, according to Mike Benz, was that it was part of USAID's effort to push an agenda. Aldo and his colleagues loved the ideas they were given and believed they were getting genuine help from angel investors within the industry. The concerts they organized for the group were much bigger, far beyond anything they had before then. USAID's promoters took things a step further by creating a social network to connect musicians and artists who were afraid of voicing out the things that concerned them about the government. Mike argues that many artists were flown to Europe because of this, and when they were asked why, the most common answer was that they were performing with native musicians in major upcoming events. While this was true in most cases, Mike believes the real goal was to train these Cuban artists as activists. He tries to prove this by the Cuban government's reaction not long after. Many artists became uncomfortable when authorities began to question people involved in the concert at least 6 times before letting them do their business. Some of them were even detained with several computers and record instruments seized as well, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. Hackers working for the Cuban government quickly got to work with the seized computers, and what they found confirmed what the leaders suspected all along. All the artists that were supported directly by Creative Associates International had huge sums of cash that were traced back to USAID. The Cuban leaders were so angry that many native musicians were put in danger through guilt by association. Where it all started was during one of Cuba's largest independent music events known as the Rotilla Festival. In 2010, Los Aldeanos, one of the first groups directly sponsored by Creatives Alliance International, performed before a crowd of 15,000 people. It was a happy moment for the team, except there were problems on the horizon. You see, at that time, Cuban government operatives were on the lookout for ongoing entertainment events that had even the slightest connection with USAID, and after finding out that the agency had infiltrated the festival, the Cuban authorities quickly took control. When news outlets outside the country called out the Cuban government for being too harsh on the country's artists, the leaders responded by labeling the rappers as victims of USAID and not themselves. Ironically, some Western lawmakers agreed with the Cuban government to varying extents. After all, How would any other government react upon noticing that foreign agents who came in to help the country's struggling economy are now trying to fight against them by using their people? One U.S. senator described USAID's actions as reckless and stupid because it failed to think about the safety of those involved in their selfish schemes. In response, USAID defended its programs by insisting that all it wanted was to help the people become more involved in ongoing matters at times when they are suppressed while denying any of their work was secret. Mike Benz called this out as a lie, as the methods they used all hint at a secret operation. If not, why would they use encrypted communication to connect with Creative Alliance International? Why was most of the money given to these artists easily traced back to USAID officials? Beyond these problems, this dealt a huge blow to Cuba's music industry. Cuba's hip-hop scene was barely doing well on a global scale before all this happened, and many global rap stars barely knew the movement even existed. Now they had become popular in a matter of months, not because of how talented their artists were, but because of a massive scandal involving a corrupt Western agency and an angry government. According to Mike, using artists as tools in secret operations is always going to backfire, and all it does in the long run is harm the very people who were supposed to be supported. With those claims covered, let's now hear what Elon recently had to say about USAID's hidden past operations. Elon's recent problems with USAID. This isn't the first time Elon Musk has called out USAID for financial corruption and bad spending habits. As far back as 2022, Elon has openly shown discomfort with the billions of taxpayer money going into countries that never seem to grow out of their bad situation. Recently, during a live Fox Business interview with Larry Ludlow, he called USAID one of the biggest sources of fraud in the world. He showed frustration with how the agency has reportedly been using the people's money for different organizations without proper supervision. A lot of the money, according to Elon, has either gone to waste or never been used for the things they were supposed to be used for. Based on the information gathered by his team at the Department of Government Efficiency, a long list of scandals were uncovered where USAID gave money to various groups involved in criminal activities. The first example he gave during the discussion was what happened after the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. The destruction was swift and devastating. It left thousands of people without homes and jobs and in desperate need of help. USAID came in and handled the situation by hiring a company called Cuban International to manage the operations needed to give resources to everyone in need. According to Elon, they were given almost $200 million to pull this off on their own. Worse yet, they did so without letting better companies compete for the job. The plan at first was to rebuild as many homes as possible, provide clean water for those affected, and help people get jobs in the process of doing this. It was a simple yet brilliant plan to bring the country back on its feet again, except that's not what happened. All it took was a regular audit to show that the company had spent most of the money on equipment and supplies to make the work faster and easier. On the surface, this doesn't sound like a bad thing, except that wasn't the plan all along. You see, the idea was to use the relief and rebuilding efforts to provide jobs for those who were affected. Simply put, local engineers would be employed to build homes, native teachers would be employed to work at the makeshift schools, while nurses and other hospital workers would be employed to work alongside the native USAID staff in treating those who were injured by the disaster, and so on. Instead of that, they decided to use machines and foreign workers to get the job done. As a result, apart from a few people who got free medical treatment, almost nobody was helped in the long run, and unemployment remained at an all-time high. Worse yet, the economy remained the same long after the company had spent all the money. Even when they promised to hire locals, all they did was bring in foreigners who were willing to do the work at a cheaper price. This was the part that frustrated Elon, as he stated that USAID has a habit of shoving huge sums of cash at people without ever checking if it's used properly. A similar situation happened with a group called Project Concern International, or PCI. From early 2014 to late 2016, USAID gave them a total of almost $500 million to help with different long-term projects spanning the next decade. You see, PCI was put up to give help to select places in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Most of their work includes medical assistance in HIV treatment and maternal health programs. While these acts were commendable, the group was caught stealing the money not long after. PCI had to pay $500,000 to settle the case. And though the legal issue was forgotten not long afterwards, it showed how easy it was for organizations to take money and use it for things that weren't approved without anyone noticing for years. When this occurred, It was a callback for most people to what happened back in the 90s when USAID gave $300 million to the Harvard Institute for International Development. The idea was to help Russia rebuild its economy after the Soviet Union collapsed. Surprisingly, the Russian government was okay with it. And better yet, Harvard professors who weren't from Russia were in complete control of all the money involved. They decided where the money went at all times, and instead of using it as intended, they spent it for personal gain. But it didn't take long for the native authorities to figure out something was wrong. A few months later, it was confirmed that these professors were using the funds to invest in Russian businesses to make more money for themselves. The scandal was exposed in 1997, and USAID was forced to cancel the project. But by then, it was already too late, as most of the money was already used in ways that went beyond what was agreed. The most recent issue came up earlier this year when USAID was caught giving out money to a political project. The total was $29 million, and it was discovered because the money didn't go through the proper channels at a time when USAID was under lots of scrutiny from Elon Musk and members of his department. According to law, when USAID gives out money to other countries, the funds first have to go through officials and government agencies, so everything is monitored and recorded for reference later. USAID allegedly skipped all these steps by sending the money directly to a group in Bangladesh that was working on political matters while the leaders remained clueless for a long time. These allegations by Elon Musk on this live conversation don't include the other times he's called them out on, like the time when Bolivia kicked out the agency from their country back in 2012 for trying to meddle in their cultural values and picking sides in private matters, or the time they allegedly built an online platform like Twitter to build a digital rebellion against the Cuban government in 2014. While the US president was looking for ways to bring USAID under the State Department, Elon's plan for the agency was to shut it down entirely. Though his plan to pull that off didn't work due to a recent case at a federal court, the world is now paying close attention to USAID's operation with more pressure than ever. Though USAID seems to be having a rough future ahead, let us know what you really think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. For more content like this, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.